Beto says unconstitutional things in a death roll. The kiddie gloves are off against Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie lets us know he wasn't high during the debate. All this and more on the Soapbox today. I'm Adley Elison, and this is the Millennial Soapbox. Guys, really exciting news. I met with a graphic designer this last week, so we're going to be rebranding the Millennial Soapbox. The previews that she sent to me have been fantastic, so I'm really looking forward to having a more professional look. Obviously, this is going to just help with rebranding, obviously with logo recognition, with brand recognition, and eventually it'll get us into stuff like merchandise, you know? So I'm really, really happy about how it's all going. I'll keep you guys updated on the rebranding situation. Now, segueing into the news a little bit, I want to give you guys an update on Syria. Simply because we talked about it last episode, I want to keep you guys updated on it. So, essentially, up until this point, in the past week, there's been a lot that has happened. So, 100,000 people have had to leave their homes looking for safety simply because they've been displaced because of the bombings, because of the shellings, because of the war that's just been going on between the Turks and the Kurds. Civilians are being bombed on both sides, so it's a really, really ugly war. And in turn, Trump actually ended up sending a letter to you guys, as reported by Al Jazeera. I want to read you guys this letter simply because it just paints the epitome of who Donald Trump is, right? So, this is the letter. It is addressed to His Excellency Tayyip Erdogan, the President of the Republic of Turkey. It says, "Dear Mr. President, let's work out a deal! ! You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people, and I don't want to be responsible for destroying the Turkey economy, and I will. I've worked hard to solve some of your problems. Don't let the world down. You can make a great deal. General Mazolim, who's the general of the Kurds, is willing to negotiate with you and is willing to make concessions that would never have been made in the past. I am confidently closing a copy of his letter to me just received. History will look upon you favorably if you get this done, the right and humane way. It will look upon you forever as the devil if good things don't happen. Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool. I will call later. Sincerely, Donald J. Trump." I mean, I don't know what you want from that. I mean, Donald Trump, to His Excellency, let's work out a deal. Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool. I don't know what else you want from me. I mean, that's pretty Trumpy if you ask me. But I mean, regardless of what you guys think about his foreign policy, it worked. After that, they ended up putting the United States, we ended up putting sanctions on Turkey. And then we also sent Vice President Mike Pence to Turkey to work out some sort of deal. Turkey ended up calling a ceasefire in the last week. Sanctions were lifted. The problem with being is, the violence is over now, but we still have all these displaced and dead people that shouldn't have been displaced and dead in the first place because the United States didn't stick to our guns, as I pointed out in the previous episode. Now, the two countries that people are looking for refuge is Hungary and Israel. But they have no interest in doing that. I mean, Hungary does not have the funds to do it, and Israel, why? They're a majority, they are a Jewish state that is majority Jewish. Why would they take in the Kurds? I mean, that's just counterproductive in my opinion. But I'll keep you guys updated on the Syria situation, see how everything is going to go with that in further episodes. So, guys, we had a debate this last week, and it was very long. It was 3 hours long. And you want to know how I knew it was 3 hours long? Because I watched it. Do I regret it? 80% of me regrets it. Because it was long, and it was long-winded and ridiculous. And the reason with it being is there were 10 participants in this debate. I'll list them off for you, just why not, right? Here we go. Former Vice President Joe Biden, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Julian Castro. By the way, that's the lowest, the very lowest of all the cabinet positions. So he's not important at all. California Senator Kamala Harris, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, former Texas Representative Beto O'Rourke, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, California billionaire Tom Steyer, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, entrepreneur Andrew Yang, and Hawaii Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Now, of those 10, I mean, we just got to remember the top three ones right now are Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is the largest and longest Democratic debate that they ever had. this is really, really bad for Democrats because it just shows how divisive and divided the Democratic Party is right now. And that does not bode for them well right now in the primaries because they're split up, but in the general elections as well. Whoever ends up having to go against Donald Trump, oh boy, I lament their political campaign. Now, up until this point, all of the debates have been split up. So they've taken like all of the nominees and divided them into 2 different nights and 2 different debates. Up until this point, Elizabeth Warren hasn't participated in any of the major candidates in the debates. So everyone was just taking shots at Elizabeth Warren because it's the first night that she was on the stage with everyone else, you know? So, I mean, for example, Beto O'Rourke. Here is Beto O'Rourke going after Elizabeth Warren.
Sometimes I think that Senator Warren is more focused on being punitive or pitting some part of the country against the other.
And then Kamala Harris also takes a couple shots.
Senator Warren, I just want to say that I was surprised to hear that you did not agree with me that on this subject of what should be the rules around corporate responsibility for these big tech companies, when I called on Twitter to suspend Donald Trump's account, that you did not agree, and I would urge you to join me.
And finally, Amy Klobuchar getting hers in.
I want to give a reality check here to Elizabeth, because no one on this stage wants to protect billionaires. Not even the billionaire wants to protect billionaires. We just have different approaches. Your idea is not the only idea.
Now, the problem with Elizabeth Warren is she makes herself an easy target. She doesn't believe in her own policy. She's not a true socialist. She's not comfortable with the talking points because she doesn't believe it, you know? And thus, everyone's just taking shots at her. I mean, she couldn't even answer her own policy questions because she's been so vague on her Medicare plan. For example, this is a clip with her not being clear.
You have not specified how you're going to pay for the most expensive plan, Medicare for All. Will you raise taxes on the middle class?
I have made clear what my principles are here, and that is costs will go up for the wealthy and for big corporations, and for hardworking middle-class families, costs will go down.
I mean, if that's not a politician being a politician, I don't know what it is. Like, it was a yes or no question, and we didn't get that. I mean, Pete Buttigieg said just as much.
A yes or no question that didn't get a yes or no answer.
Now, the reason why she's not being clear is because her plan is going to cost $30 trillion over the next 10 years. Joe Biden called her out on that in the middle of the debate. $30 trillion. Now, to put that in perspective, the U.S. debt that everyone is like freaking out about that we have is right now is $23 trillion, and she wants to spend $30 trillion over the next 10 years. So, that's a lot. And then just to put that in another perspective, the annual budget for the entire U.S. government right now is $4.4 trillion per year. So if you take $30 trillion in 10 years, divide that by 10, obviously it's 3. So she wants to add $3 trillion to the already $4.4 trillion per year that we have on the budget. That's a 75% increase. That's insane. Now, how are we going to pay for that, right? I mean, if there were money trees, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in, but hey, what the heck, right? But according to Elizabeth Warren, 2 words: wealth tax. That's how we're going to pay for it. Taxing the wealthy. It's always the talking point of the Democrats. We're going to tax the wealthy because they never pay their fair share, right? Here's the problem with that. The top 20% of Americans pay 87% of taxes. I mean, how much more can you tax? You can't take any more. I mean, you can only take so much as they're willing to give, you know? I mean, this is how ridiculous a wealth tax would be. For example, let's say I earn $1 million. I would pay half of that to tax between state and federal taxes, and income taxes and sales taxes, correct? Now, if I buy a house with that wealth, you're going to assess me the value of that house and then tax me on the value of the home every single year, apart from the property taxes, apart from all the other taxes I pay already. I mean, I don't know how much more water you can take out of the rock, you know? Like, that's ridiculous. But don't worry, though. She's not against the wealthy, as she so adequately and poignantly puts it in this clip.
Look, I don't have a beef with billionaires. We need a wealth tax in order to make investments in the next generation.
Here's the deal. Who creates the jobs? Wealthy people. When you tax the wealthy, they do 2 things. 1, they stop creating jobs. When the economy and when the market is so dynamic and businesses and companies and CEOs and wealthy people can't get a feel for how the economy is going, they stop creating jobs because they have to save money for a rainy day. They don't know if it's going to drop and go crazy, or they don't know if they're going to have the best returns they've had in 10 years, you know? And so they stop creating jobs. They stop expanding. They stop opening other branches. They stop putting money into the economy. They stop spending money, essentially, right? And then what the second thing they do is, with the money they do have that they've stopped spending, they put that into offshore banking. That money now is not taxed. You can't tax that money in the United States. So we lose out on the tax money that we would have already had we not put up a higher tax, had we not made the economy so dynamic, you know? So, I mean, this discomfort with her own rhetoric, Elizabeth Warren's, is why fellow socialists Ilhan Omar, the representative from Minnesota, the infamous AOC from the representative from New York, and Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, they're going to be announcing their support for Bernie today, actually, simply because Bernie is very comfortable. He is 100% socialist. He's 100%, I mean, you could say borderline communist, right? Now, moving on from Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Joey boy, you look old. You're acting old. You are old. I mean, the man, he comes out and he'll make a good point. I'll give him that. But then he can't counter. He's just old. He's just old. I can't tell you. I mean, here's Bernie and Biden going at it right here.
How we're going to get it done. I'm going to say something that is probably going to offend some people here, but I'm the only one on the stage who's gotten anything really big done.
But you know what you also got done, and I say this as a good friend. You got the disastrous war in Iraq done.
No.
You got a bankruptcy bill, which is hurting middle-class families all over this country. You got trade agreements like NAFTA and PNTR with China done, which have cost us 4 million jobs.
Sidebar. Sanders' points, although they sound like legitimate, they're just conflictive. They're not great points. The reason being is he's a communist. So with him being a communist, with him being a socialist, whatever it is you want to call it, whatever your flavor is, he's very isolationist in his foreign policy. This meaning that he wants to stay away and apart from other countries in politics and trade. So when he's talking about like pulling out of Iraq, when he's talking about pulling out like about NAFTA and these other trade agreements that President Biden had made, those are going to be bad ideas whether they were good or not from a normal democratic perspective because he's a socialist. So with staying away and apart from other countries in politics, the reason why that's such a bad idea and why it's essentially not feasible in today's day and age with technology and media is when you're isolationist, you depend on yourself too much. You can't look outside the country for cheaper goods. You can't look outside the country for help or anything like that because you're so worried about yourself. Like, for example, we would stop importing our fruits and vegetables from South America, you know? And with that, if we were to do it here in America, it would just raise the prices of such, you know? And then this could also lead to war as we are dependent on ourselves because interdependency within countries avoids war. For example, if we depend on Japan for steel and Japan depends on us for whatever else it is they depend on us for, then because we depend on each other for that, we're less likely to go to war because we need those goods from each other at the price that we have them. Now, there was a Secretary of State, Edward Hull, I believe, and he was a Secretary of State in the 50s or 60s, I believe it was to President Eisenhower, but he was credited on saying, a quote, it says, "Where trade crosses borders, soldiers don't." Like I said, interdependency with trade, interdependency with economics, it leads to peace. It doesn't lead to war. After this little bit with Bernie and Biden, Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden went at it as well, because why not?
So you started this question with how you got something done. You know, following the financial crash of 2008, I had an idea for a consumer agency.
And I went on the floor and got you votes. I got votes for that bill. I convinced people to vote for it. So let's get those things straight, too.
Senator Warren, do you want to respond?
I am deeply grateful to President Obama, who fought so hard to make sure that agency was passed into law.
You did a hell of a job in your job.
Thank you. But understand this.
Now, Biden looks incredibly bad in this clip. It's like, Biden, you got her votes for that bill. So, like, were you not going to get them already? Like, were you not planning on it, and then you just decided to be a good little soldier and go get them for it anyways? Like, you don't look like a hero, guy. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You know, and then the last thing you want to do in a debate is, like, you credit her doing a good job, which, I mean, like, yes, that is a nice thing to do. Yes, that is a moral thing to do. But, like, you just literally told your base, well, I look old. So, well, if Joe's looking old and he says that Elizabeth Warren does good at her job, well, I'm going to go vote for Elizabeth Warren now. Like, that's the last thing you want to do politically. I mean, in the end, Bernie looked better than both of them, both Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. He had just had a heart attack earlier this month. Now, transitioning over to Beto O'Rourke. Last weekend, there was a Democratic town hall during Pride Weekend or Pride Day or whatever the case may be, or LGBTQ Awareness Day. And Beto suggested during that town hall that he would have a mandatory buyback plan for guns to take them off the streets and make America safer. Guys, the problem is Beto is in a death roll. He knows he's not gaining traction, so he's just spinning his wheels at this point, just trying to be as crazy as he possibly can to drum up support. He's just trying to grab headlines, you know? So, because of this, Pete Buttigieg actually pressed him on this at the debate due to the lack of planning that he has with his policy.
You just made it clear that you don't know how this is actually going to take weapons off the streets. If you can develop the plan further, I think we can have a debate about it, but we can't wait. People are dying in the streets right now.
Those students who march for our lives, who in fact came up with this extraordinary, bold peace plan that calls for mandatory buybacks, let's follow their inspiration and lead and not be limited by the polls and the consultants and the focus groups.
The problem isn't the polls, the problem is the policy.
Now, Beto, he went on to say that people who do not voluntarily follow through with the buyback program during the debate would receive a visit from the law enforcement officials to force them to comply. Now, you want to know why conservatives believe so strongly in the Second Amendment? This is the exact reason why. Because law enforcement officials are going to come to my house and take my guns from me because I'm not complying with a buyback policy that directly infringes on my Second Amendment rights. Here. You know what, guys? I'm going to give you the big secret to why the Republican Party values guns and the Second Amendment so much. All right? This is the tell-all. This is, like, people think it's because of hunting. No, it's not because of hunting. People think it's to protect themselves from criminals. No, that's not why it is. It's not. I don't have a shotgun to protect myself from when a guy breaks into my house. It may be one of the reasons, but that's not the main reason. This is the main reason. Here we go. You ready? Are you ready? Because I don't know if you're ready. Here we go. So, enter John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. All right? These guys were the first modern political philosophers, and many of the founding fathers drew off of their studies and their writings when they were going about writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. Now, John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, what they said is, in a state of nature, as they put it, or essentially a state of anarchy, we're free to do whatever it is we want. We could eat what we want, we can kill what we want, we can do whatever it is we want. It's complete freedom. However, with this complete freedom, there's no rules and there's no safety. So I could kill someone, but someone very, very well as much could kill me. So, and essentially, what John Locke and Thomas Hobbes argue is that people enter into a social contract. They enter into this constitution, this contract, and sacrifice certain freedoms in order to enjoy safety and order. So I may not be able to walk out and kill whoever I want anymore, but in turn, those people can't come out and kill me as well. Thomas Jefferson, while he was writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, he applied these influences, and he recognized these rights and this safety and this order as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which we have heard about so much growing up, right? Now, in the Declaration of Independence, it says this just as explicitly. This is like the main reason for why we believe this. It says that to secure these rights, the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. So the reason why the government has powers is because we give them we consent to them and give them permission to govern us. Now, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, so whenever any form of government does not protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, quote, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness, end quote. So essentially, when a government, or if a government becomes destructive to the ends of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it's the right of the people to alter and to abolish it and to institute a new government. That's why we have guns. When we willingly grant our permission to be governed, and that government is not doing its job as per the people's ideals, it is the right of the people to overthrow that government. Obviously, it says to alter or to abolish. To alter would mean to vote. And this is why it's so important to vote. We should vote. I'm not commending that we go out and overthrow the government. And obviously not. But we should vote. When we're unhappy, we should vote and get people out. The problem with this is we have seen where it's gotten to the point in various countries. Don't tell me this doesn't happen, because it happens all the time. That there comes to a point where the government has so much power that even if you do vote them out of office, they will not leave. I can tell you from personal experience in Nicaragua, this is happening right now. Presidente Daniel Ortega, he has been president since like 2006. He wins like 85% of the vote because of voter fraud. And even if people were able to get and vote him out, he would not leave, because he is abolished term limits, and he has way too much fraud and way too much corruption that's keeping him up. We've seen this in Venezuela earlier this year. Presidente Guaido and Presidente Maduro, we had their elections where Maduro had been the successor of Hugo Chavez, who was the communist, and Maduro also was a communist. Guaido was democratically elected, and Maduro would not leave until the United States stepped in and recognized President Guaido as the president. This is why guns are so important, is because we have the ability to abolish a form of government after altering it does not work. I obviously hope to God that should never happen. I really, really hope that we never have to get to that point. But that's why we do it. What happens when we do this buyback program and we have to give all our guns back? And if we don't give our guns back, then the military comes and grabs them, gets them from us. And then what happens when they start infringing on other amendment rights? What happens on our other Bill of Rights? What happens if they start taking away our freedom of speech? What happens if they start taking away our right to due process? What happens if they start taking away our right to cruel and unusual punishment? I mean, there's a slippery slope, you know? So, and that's why we defend our right to bear arms. Now, moving on, let's do a fun fact with Adley. During the debate, the health of the nominees came up as a question, and I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of funny. Bernie Sanders, he had this bounce in his step during the debate, and I'm just gonna show you the clip. This is what ended up happening between Bernie Sanders and Cory Booker after a moderator had asked Senator Sanders about his health.
Now to the issue of candidates and their health.
I'm feeling great, but I would like to respond to that question.
I want to start by saying...
And Senator Sanders is in favor of medical marijuana. I want to make sure that's clear as well.
Thank you.
Senator Sanders, this debate does mark this debate...
I mean, that's... Thanks, Senator Sanders, for letting us know that you aren't high on the stage right now. I mean, like, have you been high on the stage or like in other debates? I mean, that would explain a lot. But I mean, we're happy we're doing better. You're doing better. Obviously, like I said many times before, life is bigger than politics. Health is bigger than politics. Family is bigger than politics. And we wish him the very best and that he continues to heal up. That's all I have for you guys now. I'm going to step off my soapbox for the week. I'm Adley Elison, and this is the Millennial Soapbox.